The wind rolled across the plain like an animal searching for a home. Dust swirled up in little twisters around the dry fence posts, rickety and gray from years of sun and neglect. The barn looked worse. Boards were slanted and missing, its roof peeled back like a wound, jagged and raw. She stood before it, one hand pressed to the swell of her belly, the other shading her eyes from the sun. She'd posted the job in town a week ago. Just a few words scribbled on a nailed-up board. Need barn roof fixed. Will pay fair. Ask at Dry Rock Ranch. No name. No pleasantries. That's how things were now. He came 3 days later, silent but not unfriendly, riding a horse that looked just as worn as he did. Tall, raw-boned, with a mess of dark hair falling to his shoulders and a jaw like carved rock. He carried a bag of tools and little else, a hammer strapped to his saddle and a rifle slung low. His eyes scanned the ranch the way a man scans a place, before deciding whether to trust it or burn it. "You the one posted the job?" he asked, voice like gravel over leather. She nodded once. "That roof's gonna cave in if the storms come early." He looked past her to the barn. "It's not gonna hold another wind. Then I need someone who can." He didn't smile, but something in his face softened. He climbed down and set to work without another word. For 2 days he barely spoke. Just the sound of hammer on wood, nails biting deep, the occasional curse when a splinter caught him. She brought him water, sometimes bread. Watched from the house porch with a hand at her lower back. He moved like a man who'd done hard work all his life. Efficient. Controlled. She learned small things about him in silences. He didn't drink, kept his tools sharp. He slept out by the barn under a worn canvas, rifle always within arm's reach. Once she caught him staring off toward the hills like something out there still had a hold on him. She didn't ask questions. Neither of them had the energy for ghosts. "You live out here alone?" he asked on the third morning, not looking up from the beam he was measuring. "Since winter. Hard way to live. It's the only way left." He nodded like he understood, hammered a nail in with 2 sharp strikes. Later, over a cup of weak coffee on the porch, she told him her husband had died under that very roof. Was trying to fix it before the storm hit. Ladder snapped, broke his neck. "I'm sorry," he said. "Yeah," she said. "Me too." The barn was half done by then. He'd replaced the worst of the beams, torn out the rot, reinforced the rafters with iron brackets he'd had tucked in his pack. He worked like a man making something permanent, though his boots were always near the horse. That evening he found her sitting by the corral watching the sky. The sun had turned everything gold and blood orange. "Looks like storm seasons." "Early," he said. "I don't mind the storms," she said. "It's the quiet afterward that gets you." He sat down beside her without asking. The wind had eased for once, the kind of silence you could sink into. "What's your name?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment. "Name doesn't matter much. Matters to me. You're fixing my roof. Might as well know who to thank if it holds." He exhaled slowly. "People used to call me Ridge." "Ridge," she repeated. "Like the land?" He nodded once. "Spent most of my life between ridge lines, fighting, building, losing things. She didn't ask what. She didn't have to." That night the wind came back, stronger than before. The next morning she woke to find him already on the roof, shirt off, skin glinting with sweat. The hammer sang a steady rhythm, echoing down the valley. She watched him, from the porch, fingers curled around her coffee mug, the baby shifting inside her. By midday, clouds rolled in. He climbed down, wiped his brow, and said, "It's coming in hard. You think it'll hold?" "Not yet," he said. "I need another day." "You might not get one." Thunder growled somewhere beyond the hills. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the fatigue etched deep around his eyes. Still, he picked up a fresh board and headed back up without another word. The wind picked up just before dusk. She stood at the base of the ladder, watching him fight the wind to keep a sheet of roofing down. "You need to come down," she shouted. "Not until I finish this section," he yelled back. The sky split open with a flash of white fire. Rain hit like thrown nails, He cursed, slipping slightly, then steadied. She gripped the ladder, heart pounding. "You'll fall." "Not today." He slammed the last nail down, slid back, and jumped to the ground. They ducked inside the barn as the rain came in full. Inside, the air smelled of fresh-cut pine and horses. She was soaked through. So was he. For a long minute, neither said anything. Just breathing. The barn creaked, but the roof didn't leak. Not a drop. She looked up. "You fixed it?" He gave her a look that was almost a smile. For now, lightning lit up the space around them. She laughed once, short and surprised. "You're bleeding." He glanced at his forearm. A long splinter had caught him near the elbow. "Not the first time," he said. She stepped forward, pulled a handkerchief from her dress pocket. "Let me." He held still as she wrapped the cloth tight. Their hands touched, brief and electric. He flinched, not from pain. Her hand stayed a second longer than necessary. "You don't talk much," she said. "Never had much worth saying." "Well?" she said softly. "You fixed a roof that killed a better man than most." He looked away. "I've had things break on me, too." She didn't ask what. She didn't have to. The rain slowed. A hush settled around them. He started to say something, but she held up a hand. "Tomorrow, finish the west edge. After that, we'll see." He nodded. She turned and walked back toward the house, slow and careful over the wet ground. He watched her go, hand resting on the hammer at his belt, not as a weapon, but as if it steadied him. Back in the barn, water trickled from the eaves, but inside it was dry. He sat down against the wall, legs stretched, eyes on the beams above. A storm rumbled into the distance, leaving behind the smell of clean dirt and promise. He let out a long breath and whispered, almost to himself, "Didn't think I'd see a place like this again." And outside, the wind began to die. But the work wasn't done, not yet. The morning light was muted beneath heavy clouds, the horizon a dull silver band that stretched wide over cracked earth and brittle grass. The wind stirred again, low and restless, whispering of storms yet to come. He was already at the barn, hammer in hand, muscles taut beneath his worn shirt. The smell of fresh-cut wood mingled with damp earth and the faint, sharp tang of sweat. Her figure appeared at the edge of the corral, wrapped in a faded shawl, the curve of her belly unmistakable even beneath layers of rough fabric. "You're out early," she said, voice soft but steady, as if she spoke into a quiet prayer. He glanced up briefly, eyes narrowing against the wind. "Storm's moving fast. Roof needs to hold." She stepped closer, boots crunching on dry soil. "Let me help." He shook his head, the muscles in his jaw clenching. "It's too dangerous. You need to stay inside." "Not while you're up there fighting the sky," she answered, a stubborn edge creeping into her tone. He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but keep low." Together they moved to the ladder, leaning against the barn's half-finished frame. Her hand brushed the rough wood as she climbed carefully, her breath quickening with every step. He followed a pace behind, steady and sure, guiding boards into place, the steady clink of hammer on nail, a sharp punctuation against the rising wind. The first sheets of tin rattled violently, threatening to tear loose. His grip tightened on the edge as he fought against the gusts, shouting over the roar. She reached for a board, hand trembling slightly but steady. A sudden lurch of the ladder sent a cold jolt through her spine. He caught her arm before she could fall. "Easy," he said, voice low, eyes dark with concern. She nodded, breath hitching, and in that moment, their eyes locked, something unspoken passing between them, fragile and electric. The sky cracked, open, lightning flashing like a warning. Rain hammered down in sheets, cold and unrelenting. They scrambled to finish the last patch before retreating to the shelter of the barn's sturdy frame. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine and wet leather. Their clothes clung to skin, soaked and heavy. She shivered, rubbing her arms, and he reached into his pocket for a scrap of cloth. Wordless, he pressed it into her hands. Outside, thunder rumbled, a distant growl turning nearer with every heartbeat. They sat in silence, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the newly mended roof. Her fingers traced the rough grain of a plank, mind drifting to the life growing inside her. The storm outside was fierce, but inside the barn, a fragile peace lingered, one they both clung to without words. Finally, he spoke. "You ever lose someone you'd give the world to have back?" She looked up, surprised by the softness in his voice. "More than once." His jaw tightened. "I lost a family once. My wife and a boy, just a baby." His gaze dropped. "Fire took them. Raiders. I couldn't save them." She didn't reach out, but her eyes held something steady, understanding. Pain shared across the silence. "It's why I keep moving," he said. "Why I never stay." "You can't outrun the past," she said gently. "Not forever." He laughed, bitter and low. "No, but sometimes you can hide from it a little longer." The rain began to ease. The storm's fury spent, but the clouds still heavy and dark. Outside, the wind tugged at the loose boards, reminding them of the work still unfinished. She rose, steadying herself against the post. "You should rest. Tomorrow's another long day." He shook his head. "Can't stop now. Roof's got to hold through more than just the rain." She frowned, sensing a deeper weight beneath his words. As evening settled, the sky burned crimson, the storm's retreat leaving a sharp, clean scent in the air. They built a fire near the barn's edge, its flickering light casting long shadows on the earth. The baby kicked against her ribs, a small promise of life and hope amid the harsh wilderness. They talked then, words slow and careful, peeling back layers of loneliness and regret. She shared memories of her husband, how he'd laughed despite the hard years, how he'd dreamed of a future that would never come. He listened, nodding, and in turn told fragments of his own story, too heavy to fully unfold, but heavy enough to leave scars. "The world out here," he said quietly, "it doesn't forgive much. You hold on to what you can or you lose everything." She smiled, tired but genuine. "Maybe it's time to try holding on to something new." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, the hardness around his eyes softened into something warmer. But peace was fragile. A shout rang out from the edge of town, harsh voices, the clatter of boots, the unmistakable rattle of guns. Her eyes widened. "What now?" He rose quickly, every muscle coiled. "Old ghosts, they've found me." She caught his arm, steadying him. "Then we face them, together." The night was heavy with anticipation, the quiet before a storm unlike any they'd seen. He picked up his rifle, checking the worn leather grip, fingers steady despite the tension. She stood close, hand resting lightly on the swell of her belly. "We'll need to be ready," he said, voice low and fierce. She nodded. "For the roof, for the baby, for us." The wind moaned through the trees, carrying the scent of danger and the unyielding promise of survival. The barn stood firm beneath the darkening sky, a symbol of endurance, fragile, battered, but unbroken. And as the first stars appeared, faint but steady, two lives were tied together by more than chance or necessity. They were bound by something fierce and real, forged in the storms yet to come. They settled in, ready for whatever the night would bring, knowing that the hardest battles were not always fought in gunfire, but in the quiet moments where fear met hope, and two hearts dared to trust. The night wrapped the ranch in shadows thick and cold, the moon a pale witness behind drifting clouds. Inside the barn, the air was tight with quiet and waiting, every creak and sigh of timber magnified in the stillness. They sat close by the flickering light of a lantern, its glow casting flickers of amber on faces drawn sharp with tension and exhaustion. Outside, the wind whispered secrets through cracked window panes, a restless voice that refused to be ignored. He loaded his rifle, with steady hands, the familiar click of each shell a rhythm that steadied his thoughts. She watched, fingers tracing the worn leather of his belt, trying to push back the gnawing edge of fear curling in her gut. The baby shifted within her, a small life stirring in the heart of this storm, fragile and fierce all at once. "Do you think they'll come?" Her voice was barely more than a breath, fragile as a thread stretched tight. He didn't answer at first, eyes scanning the dark beyond the barn's frame. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, coated with a hard edge born of years spent staring down danger. "They always come." Her fingers clenched, knuckles pale. "Then we'll be ready." There was steel beneath the softness, a promise she wasn't about to break. He studied her for a long moment. "You've got fire, you don't know how rare that is." His gaze softened, shadowed by ghosts. "Not just for what's inside you, but for you. For surviving." She swallowed, the weight of his words settling deep. "I'm not just surviving. I'm fighting to live." The barn creaked, the wind catching a loose shutter with a sharp bang. They both tensed, eyes darting toward the sound. She moved to the door, sliding the bolt shut with a practiced hand. "Storm's coming back," he muttered, "and it's bringing trouble." The hours bled slow and tense, punctuated by the occasional howl of the wind or the distant bark of a coyote. Sleep was a stranger, dreams haunted by fire and loss, and the uncertain shape of the future. When dawn finally cracked the horizon, pale and hesitant, the ranch lay quiet beneath a washed-out sky. The barn stood strong, the roof mended but still fragile against what the day might bring. He was already outside, checking the fence line, muscles taut with vigilance. She joined him, the baby a steady presence beneath her coat. Together, they moved across the land, footsteps soft on the brittle grass. "Why do you keep fighting?" she asked quietly, watching how his hands brushed over a rail, steadying the weathered wood. He looked up, eyes distant but clear. "Because giving up means losing everything that's left. Because sometimes fighting is the only way to remember who you are." She nodded, feeling the truth in that hard, simple statement. "And if you lose? Then you make sure the people you care about don't." His gaze met hers, sharp and unwavering. "That's what this roof means, not just shelter from storms, but protection from everything." A flicker of a smile tugged at her lips. "You make a good carpenter." He grinned, rough and quick. "Maybe, but this job's about more than wood and nails." They stopped by the barn's door, the wind catching loose hay and swirling it like ghosts. The storm was coming faster, now clouds boiling low and heavy, dark as a bruise. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the baby's steady kick. "It's not just the weather we have to worry about." He nodded, shoulders squared. "No, it never is." The hours that followed were a whirlwind. Thunder crashing overhead, rain hammering the roof in furious sheets, the barn shuddering but holding fast. They worked side by side, patching weak spots, bracing boards, shouting over the storm's roar. Every moment was a test, every movement a battle against the elements and the fear lurking in the shadows. When the storm finally broke, leaving a silence thick with relief and exhaustion, they collapsed inside the barn, soaked and shaking but alive. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not just the weathered man who fixed her roof, but someone who'd become something more. A partner in the fight, a keeper of promises. "I don't know what comes next," she whispered, "but I know I don't want to face it alone." He reached out, fingers brushing hers with a tenderness that surprised them both. "Neither do I." Outside, the sky began to clear, pale light spilling over the horizon like a new beginning. The barn stood strong, a testament to resilience, to the fragile but unbreakable bond forged in storms and silence. As they settled by the fire, the baby's first cry echoed soft and sure, a promise of life, hope, and the road still ahead. The dawn crept slow over the hills, painting the world in soft gold and shadow. The barn stood silent, its patched roof sturdy against the bruised sky. Inside, the air was thick with new life, the quiet hum of a sleeping baby, the steady breath of a woman still learning how to carry hope. Outside, the ranch stretched wide and wild, a land both unforgiving and fiercely alive. He sat close, his hand resting gently on her belly, feeling the faint flutter beneath his fingertips. It was a fragile connection, yet fierce, a tether binding him to something beyond the scars and storms. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air. But here, in this small space, the future whispered softly. She opened her eyes, the first light catching the curve of her face, worn but resolute. "You ever think about how we got here?" Her voice was low, tangled with disbelief and something softer, something like wonder. He looked at her, eyes shadowed with memories. "Every day. It's a long road, but we've come farther than I ever thought." Her fingers twined with his. "Far enough to stop running?" He hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "Maybe not, but far enough to stand and fight." The sound came then, a distant rumble that didn't belong to the earth or the sky, the sharp echo of hooves pounding across hard ground, fast and urgent. His body tensed, instinct flaring like a fire beneath skin. "They're back," he said, voice tight. She sat up, eyes wide, heart thudding loud in her chest. "Who?" "Men I tried to leave behind. Men with grudges that don't die easy." The baby stirred, tiny fists curling and uncurling. She pulled him close, protective, fierce. "Then we finish this together." Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying with it the scent of dust and danger. He grabbed his rifle, loading it with practiced precision, every movement sharp and sure. She stood beside him, steady despite the fear that pressed at her ribs. The sun rose higher, burning through the clouds with a ruthless heat. The first riders appeared on the ridge, silhouettes against the sky, menacing shapes that galloped closer with cruel intent. He stepped forward, rifle raised, eyes narrowing. "You came for blood, but you'll leave with none." Shots cracked, sharp and sudden, a staccato of violence that shattered the morning's calm. Dust kicked up in swirling clouds as they exchanged fire, the air thick with smoke and grit. She ducked behind the barn's corner, heart pounding, breath ragged. The baby cried out, and she pressed him to her chest, shielding him as best she could. The world narrowed to the sharp edge of survival, the crack of gunfire, the roar of horses, the fierce, raw pulse of fight. He moved like a shadow, relentless and precise, taking down one man after another with cold efficiency. The years of running, of hiding pain beneath hard eyes poured into every shot, but the numbers pressed and the danger grew. One rider broke from the group, charging straight toward her with a sneer carved deep in his face. She stumbled back, the baby wailing as he drew near, rifle raised but not yet fired. In that instant, everything slowed, the heat, the fear, the pounding blood. Her hand shot out, catching his wrist with surprising strength, yanking the rifle sideways. The man faltered, surprise flashing before rage twisted his features. He was there then, closing fast, a flash of steel in his hand. She twisted, breath catching as he swung. A blow meant to break, but met with her own desperate resistance. The baby screamed again, sharp and urgent, and something inside her broke free. A wild, fierce determination that no gunshot or blade could touch. He came, crashing between them, a bullet cutting the air, and the attacker fell with a grunt, eyes wide in shock. He stood over the man, breath heavy, gaze fierce and unforgiving. "Not here," he said, voice cold as the steel in his grip. The others faltered, scattered by the sudden loss of their comrade and the fierce defense standing in their path. Slowly, they melted back into the dust and heat, leaving the ranch to its fragile peace. Silence settled again, heavy and profound. She sank to her knees, tears mixing with sweat as she clutched the baby close, heart pounding from the adrenaline and relief. He dropped beside her, hands trembling as he reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "You're stronger than you know." She smiled through the weariness, a small, fierce light burning behind tired eyes. "So are you." The sun climbed higher, warming the land and drying the sweat on their skin. The barn stood tall, its roof holding fast against the storm and the bullets alike, a symbol not just of shelter, but of survival. He lifted her gently to her feet, their fingers entwined, the baby nestled safely between them. "This is our home now," he said quietly. "No more running." She nodded, breath steadying. "No more running." Together they stepped out into the light, the wide-open world waiting with all its dangers and promises. The past was a shadow behind them, long and lingering, but the future stretched before them, wild, uncertain, and theirs to claim. As the wind carried their quiet laughter across the plains, the barn stood witness, a testament to love forged in hardship, to lives rebuilt from ashes, and to the fierce, unbreakable bond of two souls who dared to hope again. The road ahead was far from easy, but they would walk it side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart, ready for whatever the Wild West might throw their way. And in that moment, beneath the vast sky, the promise of tomorrow was theirs.